Hey, movie fans! This weekend, Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning hits theaters and potentially marks the end of the Mission Impossible franchise. Now, I am a big fan of most all of these Mission Impossible movies. I know it's almost a meme at this point of, let's see what crazy stunt Tom Cruise is going to do this time around. But I think that kind of undercuts just how good of movies these actually are. So today, I want to look at all 7 of the Mission Impossible movies that we've gotten thus far and rank them from worst to best. But before we get into it, I want to hear your thoughts. What is your favorite Mission Impossible movie? What's your least favorite Mission Impossible movie? What's one that you think is kind of underrated? Whatever your thoughts, let me know down in the comments below. And without further ado, let's kick us off at number 7. We have Mission Impossible 2. Now, this should come as no surprise to just about anybody, because this often ranks as the quote-unquote worst in the series by a lot of people's metrics, myself included. But the thing is, yeah, it's not great by Mission Impossible standards, but it's also not the worst movie I've ever seen. This is somewhat of an enjoyable movie, at least. It's the most Mission Impossible movie of its time. You can tell when this movie was made. It is, oh boy, screams early 2000s here. Back in the first couple Mission Impossible movies, at least the first 3, they were all directed by different people with very different styles and tones. The first one was much more of an espionage thriller. This one was just a traditional action movie, and it didn't quite work. There was way too many mask reveals and weird mask reveals. It's just not particularly a great movie. And also, I'll say, we'll talk about the stunts in the Mission Impossible movies as we go along, and the stunt in this one is Tom Cruise almost gets stabbed in the face. It doesn't seem like great on paper, but holy crap, it's a terrifying stunt. But Tom, why was that the thing that you chose to go with? It's an interesting choice. 2 is just, it's Mission Impossible 2. I'd be amazed if it's anybody's favorite, but also as far as action movies go, I've seen much, much worse. Next up at number 6, we have one that might be a slightly controversial pick, but I don't care. Mission Impossible 3. Now, I know a lot of people hold this one in really, really high regard, primarily because of the performance of Philip Seymour Hoffman as the villain. And yeah, Philip Seymour Hoffman is great, but I gotta be honest, guys. I rewatched 3 recently, like leading up. I've been watching all the Mission Impossibles leading up to The Final Reckoning. I watched Mission Impossible 3, and I still, for the life of me, can't really remember a whole lot of things that happened. I know they're looking for the rabbit's foot, and Philip Seymour Hoffman is the bad guy. And Tom Cruise has that really, really long running shot because it's a Tom Cruise movie. But besides that, 3 is just a victim of not being necessarily that memorable. I don't think there's anything that really stands out to me all that much. That being said, it was J.J. Abrams' first movie, so maybe I'll give him a pass on that because he was more or less a TV guy up until this point. This is before his Star Trek days, his Star Wars days, his Super 8 days, if anybody still remembers Super 8. I will still give credit to Mission Impossible 3 because it introduced Benji, my second favorite character behind Ethan Hunt himself. Love Benji, love Simon Pegg, and just about everything he's in. He's been such a great addition to the team, and having him and Luther kind of be the constant throughout most of these movies has been a really nice touch, so I will at least give 3 that. At number 5, we have the most recent Mission Impossible movie, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, also known as Dead Reckoning Part 1, and to me, that's the biggest flaw of this movie, is it is so blatantly a part 1 of a story, so I can't really gauge it until I see The Final Reckoning, because The Final Reckoning was supposed to be Dead Reckoning Part 2, and then they rebranded it, which is probably a wise choice. But the thing is, if you're gonna do that, the first half still needs to function as a standalone story, and it feels like Dead Reckoning is a lot of setup for something down the road, and it doesn't really stand on its own as an individual movie slash story. It's a lot of setup, and it's cool and all, but by Mission Impossible standards, it's really not up to snuff with the rest of the movies. Now, talking about the big stunt for this one, yeah, the bike thing off the cliff was cool, but I felt like because of the marketing, we saw it to death from basically every angle that we could have before the movie even came out, due to a variety of factors, because this movie was filmed around 2020, 2021, so you know, that stunt was just kind of okay. It wasn't necessarily the most interesting because it had been played to death in the marketing, because they really leaned into, let's see how crazy Tom Cruise's stunts are. Action is good, stories, because again, it's a part 1. But in good Mission Impossible fashion, they introduced some cool new characters. I didn't mind the villain, but he's not the most dynamic. But I really like Pom Klementieff as more or less this like mute assassin character for the most part. She was really cool. I don't mind Haley Atwell, but I don't necessarily love that they kind of brought her in to replace Rebecca Ferguson's character, because I'm still bitter that they killed off Ilsa Faust, who was one of my favorite characters in the entire franchise. I thought she brought a lot to the table. Next up at number 4, we have the original Mission Impossible from 1996, which, saying that out loud, just is absolutely bonkers to me that this franchise has been going on for almost 30 years now. And going back and rewatching the original and seeing where the franchise is nowadays, it is so interesting. It's so starkly different. The first Mission Impossible is very much like a lot of the spy / espionage / intelligence movies of its time. Like a lot of the Jack Ryan movies like Clear and Present Danger, The Hunt for Red October. It's a lot closer to that than big gung-ho action. So I think that's why it's a little lower on my list for me. If just this is the origins of it, it's closer probably to the show, which I did not grow up watching the show. I also didn't really grow up watching some of these earlier Mission Impossible movies. We'll talk later about where I kind of stepped into the franchise. So maybe the reason I have this lower is my expectations for what a Mission Impossible movie is probably had a different bar because of where I came in going, oh, this is very different. This is slower, methodical. This is much more about the intelligence side of it, the covert spy stuff, not so much the gadgets, but the story behind it. Big stunt-wise, it's funny to go back and watch the original movie because it's been parodied to death at this point of just seeing Ethan descend in the CIA headquarters and not touch the ground. The stunt. It's basically the Mission Impossible stunt that they've tried to replicate or make even grander with the sequels, but the first is probably still one of the best. Next up at number 3, we have Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Kind of what I think is the underrated one / the forgotten about one, because when it comes to talking about Mission Impossible, I feel like we really don't talk about Rogue Nation like at all, but it's kind of weird because that was more or less one of the most significant pivot points in the entire franchise. So like I said earlier, up until this point, every single Mission Impossible movie had been directed by a different person with a drastically different style. From Rogue Nation to The Final Reckoning, they've all been done by Christopher McQuarrie and also have more or less a continuous storyline that kind of builds upon the previous movie. You don't necessarily have to see the movie before it, but events from the previous movie lead into each other. Like 5 and 6 kind of paired together, 7 and now clearly 8 paired together, but there's also elements from 5 and 6 in 7 and 8, so there's a foundation built upon each other, and so on and so forth, which up until that point hadn't really been done before. It's a lot like how the Daniel Craig James Bond movies all kind of had their story arc culminating in No Time to Die, which before that with like the Pierce Brosnan and the Sean Connery, they were treated as individual stories. So that was what they were doing with Rogue Nation, and it's interesting. It's a good solid movie with some good solid stunts, but I don't think it's nearly as good as the top 2 here. It's an interesting pivot in the direction, but it's more of the action and adventure that we would know for like 6 or 7 or hopefully 8. We'll see. But there's a lot of good things that I like in Rogue Nation. It introduced Ilsa Faust. Like I mentioned, she's already one of my favorite characters. She added a new dynamic to the team. I really liked the big stunt in this, which is Ethan Hunt hanging on the side of a plane. But I also don't love it because it was in the opening of the movie and it doesn't really tie back into the rest of the movie. The thing is, I think the stunt should somehow always be connected to the story, and him hanging on the side of the plane, while cool, wasn't necessarily the most like story critical stunt possible, and it was just kind of a gimmick. They're trying to outdo the previous stunt, which I still maintain is the best of all time, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Overall, I like Rogue Nation. Feel like it's a little underrated and we don't talk about it nearly enough, and it's got this weird yet important place in the Mission Impossible timeline. Next, at number 2, we have what I would assume is actually a lot of people's pick for the best Mission Impossible movie, but it's my number 2, Mission Impossible Fallout, also known as the Henry Cavill one. I really enjoy this one. I like this one significantly more than Rogue Nation. Fallout is like Rogue Nation polished and perfected pretty much. You got Henry Cavill, who I really wish the trailers and the marketing didn't spoil that he was a bad guy. But yeah, that kind of changes your perspective going into it. That you just know he's a bad guy right off the bat. But the bathroom fight with the arm cocks is just outstanding. It's iconic at this point. I love the stunt, but I also hate the stunt in this movie. So it's basically the Halo jump. If they jump out of a plane in real time and then they land on a building, it's cool and all, but why the heck did you have to muddy it with all this CG? Why couldn't we just have a clear shot of them descending? It makes me kind of wonder, like, were we not able to get a good continuous oneer here? Was that too difficult? Which, if that's the case, I do not blame you. I can't even imagine trying to keep focus with the camera while descending from the heavens. Getting back to the story of Fallout, it's a good spy thriller like you get more so with the original, the first couple Mission Impossibles, but the action that you get with the later ones, it's really, really epic and entertaining. You see the Tom Cruise injury on camera. I always love pointing that out when I'm watching him going, hey, that's where he broke his ankle, but he still kept running because this man is nuts. I love Fallout. It's a lot of fun. Introduces a cool lore to it with the White Widow and like what happens behind the scenes. So there's some other sketchy organizations, kind of like the Max character in the first Mission Impossible, bring that back into the fold. Love Fallout. However, it's not my favorite of the Mission Impossible franchise. That is, at number 1, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. I absolutely adore this movie. It is one of my favorite action movies of all time, if not my favorite action movie of all time. Why I love this movie so much is this was my first Mission Impossible movie. Not the first one. I came into the franchise with 4, so I will always have this nostalgia and appreciation for 4. However, taking nostalgia goggles off, I still think this is the formula perfected for Mission Impossible. You have Ethan Hunt doing not arguably, in my opinion, the greatest movie stunt ever, with him climbing the side of the Burj Khalifa and seeing the panels like wobble while he's climbing up it. Like, you could tell that's actually him. And also the cameraman and me going, how did you film this very reflective surface without getting the camera in the shot? That's the whole other story. But the fact that the stunt furthers the story. It's not like Rogue Nation where he's hanging on the side of the plane, but it doesn't connect to anything really. This furthers the story. This stunt had to happen to propel the story forward. But take the stunt out, the cast and the story are fantastic. I wish we could have gotten more Jeremy Renner in the Mission Impossible franchise. I get that he was kind of the backup in case Tom Cruise didn't want to come back for later sequels. That's a whole other story that you can look into. But I thought he brought an interesting dynamic. You have Benji, who I have already said is one of my favorites of all time. You have Paula Patton, who is pretty good here. She's not like Ilsa Faust levels of good or Haley Atwell levels of good, but she's pretty serviceable. She clearly takes no nonsense as she's got this great fight scene. It's good team dynamic. You got a lot of good setup and payoff, while also diving more into the character of Ethan Hunt that kind of has been a consistent trend throughout the franchise of let's delve more into what makes him him. Why is Ethan Hunt the way he is? And you get a little bit of that with the potential of what happened to Julia with him and Jeremy Renner and his ex-wife. And it's an interesting direction to go. It's got some thrilling chase scenes, got great action, great team chemistry, and I just love a good squad movie if done properly. I absolutely love Ghost Protocol. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's the movie that got me hooked into this franchise, and I have never really looked back since. It's just such a well-made movie. But what do you guys think? What are your favorite Mission Impossible movies of all time? What are ones that you're not as thrilled about? Whatever your thoughts, let me know down in the comments below. As always, if you like what you see and want to see more, subscribe to the channel. And as always, stay sharp, movie guys and gals.